Hello and welcome. I'm Paisley. Thank you for joining me for this yoga practice. We're going to begin with a blanket and we're going to fold it or roll it pretty low like this. And then once you've got that, you're going to lie back on it, and where you want it to be positioned is roughly around your shoulder blades. So as you begin to set up and you recline, you just want to make sure that your head and shoulders are on one end and your behind is on the other end. Ideally, this lift is not under your low back either. And it is a height where it's pretty easy for you to stay with no discomfort at all. It should feel relaxing and pretty easeful. So if it's not working, maybe try making it a little lower or taking your ponytail hair tie out. And we're just going to rest here as kind of our centering pose at the beginning of practice. And while you're resting, I'm going to give you a few reasons why this is a really useful and restorative to the body and mind shape. So the first thing is that most of us in this day and age tend to have a little bit of forward head posture. The chest kind of collapses, the arms, the shoulders, the head, everything is forward. So this is going to counteract time spent on computers, phones, etc. Second is when we are stressed out or overwhelmed, whether it's emotionally or just with a lot of tasks, we tend to shorten our breath or hold our breath, and this is propping the lungs up and opening all the diaphragm area, the whole breathing apparatus, and hopefully that can ease some of our stress. And then the third thing last thing that I'll mention is that this is going to be beneficial if you have stiffness in your low back. Low back tends to do most of the back bending and mobilizing, so we're kind of shifting that back bend higher, and I'll talk more about that later. But for now, just take a few more breaths trying to settle your weight back, and in particular, kind of around your solar plexus and your belly. Let that part, your low back, all that just drop toward the floor, so that what's really opening is your chest, your upper back, the front of your throat. Feel free to move your arms around or move your head a little bit, but just try to stay on this prop for just a little bit longer. Last couple breaths, just really letting the weight of your body sink into the support that's there to relax. The next time you breathe in, get a nice big full breath, as full as you can, and at the top of that inhale, just pause, full, hold it. And then control your exhale nice and slow. Out, mouth or nose is fine right now. If you do have your eyes closed, just blink a little bit so you're preparing to move, and we want to not move quickly because we've kind of been here for a while. And when you are ready to move, what you're going to do is just roll to your side, and then you're going to transition to Sphinx pose. So you're not really sitting up. You can, if you like, I have like really bony elbows, so if you want, you can put the blanket under your elbows or whatever. And what I want you to do is tuck your chin so that your neck is long. And once you've got that happening, take your attention down to your pelvis. You're going to lift a little bit, rocking side to side so that you can tuck your kneecaps. I know that's a weird place to think about, but toward the floor. In other words, not turned out. And imagine that your low back could be broader. The back of your pelvis is more broad. So chin is tucked, neck is long, and then low back is wide or broad. You're going to squeeze your glute muscles, that's your butt, your tail, and push down with your pubic bone toward the floor. And as you do that, don't let your heels turn in, don't let your legs turn out. Keep that breadth of low back. So squeeze the butt, push the pubic bone down, so you're tipping the pelvis into a tucked position or posterior tilt. And then you're going to remember where that roll of the blanket was in your upper back, and you're going to see if you can start to mobilize that and bend a little higher. Now, anatomically, the way the bone structure is in the thoracic spine, it just doesn't really backbend. That's why the low back does everything, but we're just visualizing that that's what's moving. We're not just bending in the neck or the low back. So squeeze the buns, tuck the tail, try not to let the legs change, so kneecaps pointing to the floor, bending in the thoracic spine around the back of the heart. That's what eventually would raise your gaze. Now, you might stay here and you might be fine here. This might be plenty of work, or maybe you want to come higher. You could just put your hands down and kind of start to coil up more like cobra. I'm going to stay low, but your choice. And then exhale and just open your elbows to the side and drop your head down onto the pillow of your hands. A few breaths, and use the floor as a reference point for your breathing. So feel how your belly is touching the floor. Try to expand your belly down into the mat so it's like it's making a bigger footprint. And if you could, you would imagine that your low back is touching the ceiling, or at least it's lifting. So when you inhale, the low belly drops toward the floor and the back rises toward the sky. And you start to make more room to breathe. Just be here for 2 or 3 more breaths. Doing some belly breathing, not diaphragmatic breathing, just expanding all of the tissue around the middle in all directions. We're going to come into a twist from here. So you'll raise as if you're going to go back to Sphinx, but that's not where we're going. Thread your right arm behind your left. Drop your shoulder to the mat. As you reach your right shoulder across, bend your left knee up toward your right elbow. And then turn your chest. You can let your hips and knees slide so that your hips are stacked. So left hip on top of right. And then left shoulder rolling toward the floor. So you use your right hand to hold your left knee. And you want to picture your femur, that's your thigh bone, as if it's lengthening. So you don't need to straighten your leg, but just from your hip toward your knee, there's an idea of elongating. And maybe also the feeling of pulling down with your hand on your knee. Turn your belly to the left, but keep lengthening the knee to the right. Left shoulder to the floor, maybe even turn your head. Now this is kind of a hard description to describe to you, or transition to describe, but it's easy when you just watch or do it, so you could look if it makes sense. You're going to start to roll onto your back, and as you do it, you're going to bend your right knee up to catch your left ankle, and then you're forming that figure 4 shape for the hip stretch. So your hips will be kind of crooked on your mat. Just shift them over until you're level again, and then pick up your legs. So you're going to hold the right knee with your hands. Now, if you do that and you have any kind of like back pain or knee pain, you can always just put your foot back down and use your left hand to push your hip away. That's a nice variation. I'm going to just stretch this blanket out underneath me. It's nice to have the softness, but that lack of evenness is a little weird. So when you start this kind of figure 4 thread the needle position, just let your back round. Let the back drop toward the mat. Let the back of the waist settle toward the floor. Back of the kidneys kind of dropping. And since you've been there a while now, we're going to just give a little slight variation. So you're going to tilt your pelvis, so now anterior, so tail toward floor, low back lighter on the mat. That means your knees are going to move away from your belly, and your spine's going to be more neutral. You're going to try to keep that neutral position. In other words, don't change your spine and your pelvis alignment. Just see if you can bring your knee closer to you. Closer to your chest is what I mean to say. You're everywhere. Go ahead and put your right knee down. Take your left leg straight up in the air. Now, if you have a yoga belt, you could lasso your belt. I have 20 million yoga belts, but I'm not going to get up to get them. So if you don't have one, you can join me. Just hold the back of your leg somewhere and aim to have your foot something like above your pelvis. Don't worry about pulling it way toward your head at this point in time. Just right knee bent, left leg straight or straight-ish, and start to become aware of the hip flexor, the top of the hip on the left side, the crease of that leg. So as you begin to straighten your leg, you want to feel like the front of your thigh is moving away from your belly or away from your chest. If, when you begin to straighten your leg, it pops up towards your belly, toward your head, or lifts your kind of hip away from the floor, you're triggering a nervous system reaction that is not calm. I know that's a weird place to look for the body, but it's for this in the body rather. But it has to do with kind of the fight or flight reflex and the muscles that work with running. So if you straighten your leg and you get that sense of lifting or elevating the thigh toward your head, bend your knee. See if you can get more weight in the back of your pelvis on the left, on the floor, even the back of your waist on the floor. And that as your leg grows straighter, it's as if your femur is moving deeper back away from your head in your leg. It's settled into the socket. And there's a downward flow of energy. So we call that apana in yoga. This is the grounded current that helps you calm down. So we're going to be here a little bit longer. I know you've been there a while. You might be bored. Mind is usually bored. Body needs more time. So give the body the time it needs. It's probably been on overload for years, or at least hours, right? That's why the mind keeps going. Because it's used to that stimulation. Body is like, dude, slow down. So you could look for some cues of relaxation that are more subtle. They're more related to the nervous system. This would be things like kind of a spontaneous like sigh or yawn or breath. Like you didn't know you were going to just yawn and it just like came out of nowhere. You might notice an emotion that arises, like an urge to sob or smile. Or maybe there's an increase in saliva, like when you're falling asleep. 2 more breaths. You're doing a really good job. If you stuck out the whole time, I'm proud of you for staying with it. I know it could be hard for the mind. When you exhale again, just drop that knee or foot or both and take a moment to not move. We're going to go into our second side twist from here. So I would suggest that you just move your hips a little to the right. We're going to straighten the left leg, bend the right knee, and cross it over to the left. So we're trying to get the hips stacked with the right hip above the left, initially at least, and the right shoulder toward the floor. Remember, this visual is like your femur, your right thigh bone is lengthening toward the left from hip to knee, creating some space again across the low back and pelvis. You might even find that pulling it toward the floor also feels good. You might get more stretch in the tissues of the glute med and different parts of the deep rotators there in the hip area. If you feel impingement in your hip socket, then just don't pull down so hard. Just pull out instead. Turn your belly to the right. Lengthen your knee to the left. You could turn your head too, if you want, to the right. And then this is that transition where you're going to start to bend up the straight leg, catch your right ankle, keep bending, and you end up in figure 4, and then just scoot your butt back over on your mat, and then pick up your left leg. Again, if your knees hurt or your back or any part of you is not okay with that or it's too much, just put your leg down, push the right knee away. For now, relax your low back, let it round a little bit or soften toward the floor. And then the second part is to tilt your pelvis into a slightly more neutral shape. So you'll probably have to go more anterior, which means more weight toward your tailbone, less in your low back. And then keeping that neutral-ish position and pull in again. So the legs have to let go. The hip muscles have to let go enough to allow for that, as opposed to just rounding the back to get the legs closer. Couple more breaths. Aware of any emotional release. I just felt that come on for me with that big sigh. Okay, put the leg down. We're heading into the hamstring stretch on the right leg. Again, lassoing your foot with a yoga belt, or towel for that matter, or holding the back of your leg. And I am less interested in how straight you get your leg or how close to your face you get it. We're not working on contortionism today. We're working more on some slightly more gentle stretches that attend to calming the nervous system via slow movement and some very particular parts of the body that we are addressing here. So remember here, we're trying not to get the hip flexors, the top of the thigh, to pop up when we begin to straighten the leg. So one visual that helped me with that is to think of that kind of same idea of like growing your leg longer. So to straighten it by elongating your leg versus just jamming your knee to straight. That's one way that I feel helps me. The other way is to just be really aware of kind of the contact the back of my body is making on the mat or the floor. And if it starts to like harden and lift up, I'm kind of in that fight or flight realm. It might be a low grade of it, but let's try to turn that off. So low back is relaxing. So we're not trying to tilt the pelvis to neutral. We're letting it be just a slight tuck, a slight posterior tilt. We're working on softening around the crease of the hip and this visual of the thigh moving away from the belly especially if you're engaging your quads to get your legs straight. I mean, you have to engage your quads to get your legs straight, but the more you work them, the more likely you are to go into that old hip flexor thing. Now, the main hip flexor, the biggest hip flexor, is your psoas muscle, and it connects into kind of the same vicinity as your kidney and adrenal area, and it's kind of the one that's going to go, oh shit, let's run when something happens. So it's going to prime when you're in that hypervigilant mode, and we're just waiting. This is just like mental effort is patience, like just be patient, and we're just waiting for the body, which is on a completely different schedule than the mind. And then you just attend to those cues. Do you notice any like global relaxation, whole body going, ah? Or a local area that lets go? Not just your hamstrings. I'm talking about like more nuanced than that. Does your breath change? What about your forehead? Or your shoulders? What kind of clenching or not is there? Is there any kind of nuance with something deeper, more subtle going on? Let's give it a few more moments. Often one side is stickier than the other and just takes longer, and you're welcome to pause the video and stay longer, or come back and do it a second time if that's you. And then when you are done, bend up that right knee and then pick up the left one. We'll hold both knees with the hands. Let the tail lift a little bit. Just rock the knees from side to side so the weight massages the low back, the back of the waist. And that's where one end of the psoas is, the top end of the psoas. It originates there by the on the lumbar spine and T12. On two sides of your spine. Okay, so you're going to draw your ribs down, press your back into the mat, curl your head up. So you're doing a crunch, but we're not doing it because we're just trying to strengthen our abs. We're doing it because we're trying to broaden our backs and press them into the floor. So even the upper back can get involved with that. You might lift your elbows. Think of it almost like your back, your lats are like the hood of a cobra. They're just expanding out to the sides, creating space. And then push your knees into your hands, or use your hands on the floor, whatever you want to do, or the back of your legs, and sit yourself up. Okay, so when you arrive at sitting, you're going to swing both of your feet to the left. So I am not mirroring you. I am doing my left. And you're going to go ahead and be in a little bit of an asymmetrical situation here where your hips are not quite level. And your left hip, you're going to let it drop down, but it's likely that it's going to be not that way. Now, if this is not good for your knees, you could always just take your legs out or do kind of more of like a 90-90 situation. Anyway, take your right hand behind you. Prop with that hand a lot of length in your spine. Prop yourself up so there's a lot of length. And notice that when you lift, often there's a tendency just to lift the front, and then that low back area will kind of squeeze and shorten again. So when you prop, I want you to lengthen your back, especially there by your right kidney. So your right hip down, back body long on the right. Even if your shoulder is kind of coming forward and doing some weird monkey business, don't worry about that. We'll deal with that in a minute. So just open that kind of flank there on the side of your body, and then start to twist to the right. You're kind of already pre-twisted when you set up in this, but when you twist, you're filling out the back of your waist on the right side. So your quadratus lumborum, your QL, this little square area of muscle that sits pretty evenly between the bottom ribs and the top of the pelvis and against your spine. Flush that back. press it back. Pull your waist back, broaden the back of your waist. Keep it broad as you twist. It should be getting more broad, not less. Even if you feel less long in your spine. We're just doing this as a variation today. Look down with your eyes. Ground yourself. Remember that grounded, calming energy. Energetic body. On inhale, untwist. Take your left leg diagonally to the left. Again, not mirroring you. This is my left leg. Right leg, however you want to feel okay. Now we're going to turn toward the straight leg, so to the left. And that same part of the back, we're going to target stretching that again. So you're going to go kind of diagonally over to the left side. You could straddle your leg with your hands or grab on and kind of pull. And you're going to kind of do this little pushing on the floor maneuver where you push down with your right hand and pull the left side of your waist back. So you're spiraling your belly around and you're taking that left side and wrapping it that right side and wrapping it forward as your left side waist pulls back. So you're rotating, rotating, rotating with lots of weight down in your right hip. And then if you want it, you don't have to, but if you want it, you could aim your head toward your knee. This pose is called head to knee or head of the knee pose, Janu Shirshasana. So left waist picks up and pulls back. Right waist wraps forward. Head aims down. So depending on your body, you might feel lots of stretch in your leg. You might feel it in your waist. I'm definitely a waist feeler. So just notice what you're feeling there. Okay, sit on up. And now we'll sweep the feet over to the right for Bharadvajasana. Stacking the feet or maybe doing that little kind of separated leg, bent leg version. Prop yourself up with your left hand so that the back of your left waist is long. So even if it feels a little bit more rounded than normal, today I'm saying let's do that on purpose. We're just kind of calming ourselves with that, right? So a little drawn back, gaze down, start to twist to the left. So as you twist to the left, you're filling out the back of the waist on the left side. So it's not that we're not creating length. We are, it's just not our priority. And the priority in the lengthening we're doing is that the back body is getting more attention of length than the front body. So it's not really like a back bend. We're just dropping the left hip down, the sitting bone's down. The right one's going to be lighter, but it's in the direction of the floor. I'm pushing against my knee with one hand and pushing down into the floor to create length with the other hand. So waistline back, twisting around, keeping the gaze soft toward the floor. Inhale and come up. And now we're sweeping the right leg out to the side, keeping the left leg bent. Any option or variation with that leg there. We're going to rotate to the right this time. And remember this idea of when we sit up straight, a lot of times we just kind of jack the back to get the front long, and we just forget that like the back can be long too. So sit up with some length in the whole circumference of your rib cage, and then keep turning and use your hands on the mat to assist with that. So I feel like it helps me to push down with the right hand. And as you push down with the right, you take the right side of your waist and you pull it back away from your leg. So remember earlier we stretched the leg and then we were moving the leg away from the belly. And now we're moving the belly away from the leg. And we want to do both same time, ideally. So belly back on the right. Left side of the waist wraps forward. So you're twisting for sure. And you're pulling back on the right side of your waist, kind of powerfully, like it's pretty active in your belly. And you're keeping that right thigh down, femur toward the floor. Right side of the waist back, left side forward. Maybe you dive your head down. And you should feel that kind of QL area on the left side, kidney area, insertion there, the origin rather there of the psoas alongside the spine, but really more the quadratus lumborum, maybe even down into your outer hip. Right side back a lot, left side forward a lot, head down maybe. Right leg toward the floor. And then come on up. Bend your right leg. See if you can cross your legs. If that's no good for you, just stretch your legs out in front instead. And telescope up through your spine. So that same visual of length, front, back, right, left, everything lengthening. And what we'll do is a little movement with the hands that kind of comes from the world of Tai Chi to mix the Chi by going up with one hand and down with the other. So the Chi, or the prana, we call it in yoga, this vitality, we have a very complicated circuitry, and the energy can move in many directions at once, and we're going to just focus on up and down. So you can just breathe normally. I kind of like to exhale and squish the hands toward one another. Now they're passing by, they're not actually going to touch. So you just kind of get to that middle point, and then when it starts to become like they're expanding away from each other, that's when I tend to inhale. And then when you get to the top of the inhale and the top of kind of your hand movement, you swap your hands. So now they're facing each other again. And then exhale. You're pulling up with one hand and pressing down with the other. They're going to pass by each other, and you might start to inhale when you do that. So one is still going down, the same one is still going up. And you just repeat this. We're going to do it a few more times, and you just visualize this balancing current that you're creating. You're balancing it in a nervous system way because you're doing different things with your right and your left side. It kind of makes your crossing your midline brain work happen. Even though you're physically not crossing your hands over your midline, you're kind of working your brain in that way. And then you might notice, like going back to this idea of subtlety, that in your energetic body, the way it feels to do this with your chi is that maybe the downward push is what you need. Maybe you need more grounding. Maybe more earthy, releasing down with your energy, letting that agitation get sent out and down. Or maybe you notice that you're a bit more down already, and you need that rising current. You need that like uplifting, vibrant, like cheer me up a little bit thing going on. So you're really getting both, but just let's do 2 more, and you just focus on which one you need. And I literally had to look because I'm getting this really interesting energetic body sensation of like the feeling of walking through a spider web. Like I feel like there's stuff on me, and there's not. So something's going on. I'm not sure what. Just a tingling, but like on my biceps. Now, the next time that your hands come toward each other, start to place them such that they're over each other, one above the other, as if you're compressing all of this beautiful energy into a radiant ball. And you're holding that imaginary ball of light right in front of you, pulling in all this support and brilliance and love and golden energy, white energy, blue, black, whatever color you need. Just kind of coalescing it here in the middle between your hands. And then I'm going to give you a couple of choices with this little ball of life and light that you have. One, if you need a little boost, you need to like restore your energy bank, you're going to just turn your hands and kind of imagine that you're kind of smushing that, or offering that, smushing sounds negative, but into your energetic body. It's being absorbed by your energetic body. And the other choice would be to offer it out, to turn your hands, to send it out to a specific person or place or thing, or just to wherever the intelligence of that light knows to go. And then in either case, we'll finish with just kind of a boundary shield improvement here, just pushing forward with your hands and imagining kind of this, I always picture it like it's a chromed out bubble. I know that's really funny, but I do love cars. I know that you probably didn't know that about me, but the chrome is so people, the world, can see themselves. There's a reflection there and it's bouncing off you. You can still see through it. It's like some magical mirror. And you do not have to pick it up. Anything that's coming, it's just going to bounce back, and someone can choose to learn from that or whatever. So you can kind of notice anywhere around you that shield, that chrome bubble feels weak or holy. You can kind of plug that up if you need. And then when you feel done, just drop your hands, and we'll finish with one breath together. We're going to take that in through the nose and let it out through the mouth like a sigh. Thank you so much for doing this work with me today. That's really your own self-care for working with your energetic body, your nervous system, your physical body, all those great things. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.